Great. Thank you very much, Lynn, and welcome everyone who's in attendance. Just because I can't see what you're seeing, Lynn, does the screen sharing look okay?
Yep, it looks great. You're good to go.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And as Lynn indicated, we've been doing a series of sessions, mainly to share information, but probably more importantly to take your questions in terms of what's on your mind as you reopen and questions you're facing, and we'll do our best to answer. I will say up front that we may not have the answer to every question, and if so, we will state that and then take the question away and do our best to pull an answer together and send it back out to you through Lynn. So without further hesitation, happy to be here, happy to be talking about COVID and reopening. So what I'm going to cover in the next few minutes is just a brief overview of our current status with respect to COVID, discuss some basic safe infection prevention and control practices and measures for safer reopening, and some of the challenges that people can face. Taking a step back first, it's having income, having employment, these are actually, they're important from a health perspective. And so I view that, public health and business have a joint goal here that we open, and we open in a manner that's safe, that allows us to be able to continue to reopen and be able to stay open going forward. Current status, and the little thing on the right-hand side, the graphic is just a snapshot of the dashboard that you may have seen on the Ottawa Public Health website, where you can get up to the day updates on numbers of cases, hospitalizations, deaths, that kind of thing. We're in a good place in Ottawa at the moment. Our number of cases are limited, but what I would say is they're not zero. And of course, we know about the cases that have been diagnosed. The people without symptoms, of course, don't know they're infected. Not everyone necessarily will go for testing. So really what we see is the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. So our cases are relatively small, but it does mean that there is transmission going on in our community. And so what that means is that as businesses open, and just the nature of that, we're increasing the opportunities for interaction, we're increasing the opportunities for transmission. And that, coupled with the fact that the vast majority of us are still susceptible. Probably 95% plus of us have not been infected. So we need to be cautious going forward. And certainly we've seen the implications of not opening cautiously in other places. In terms of challenges, just in terms of the policy kind of context, the provincial government is the lead in terms of identifying things that are opening and the sort of restrictions or caveats associated with them. Our role in local public health is to provide guidance and some additional tailoring and detail often that's needed in terms of applying those things locally. Unfortunately, we don't typically get told ahead of time what the announcements are going to be. So then it usually takes us a little while to get ourselves oriented and to be able to provide the additional guidance that's sometimes required. In terms of things that I'm going to talk about here are the things listed there on the slide for you in terms of making sure you take a look at existing guidance. There is predominantly health and safety type guidance. So in terms of what the employer's responsibilities are from a occupational health perspective for their employees, there's less information available on sort of the overall public health sorts of things that you need to think about in terms of having customers and clients and that using your services. But overall, I mean, you got to think about your physical space, your employees, the customers, and thinking about those who are going to be more vulnerable, either due to age or underlying medical conditions. At the end, there's a list of resources from different levels of government and with hyperlinks, so for additional details and resources for these kinds of things. In terms of just general practices, depending on the type of business that you are, For some, it applies more than others, but just to be complete, we'll mention it. So in terms of one's workforce, so the fewer people that are at work, the less you have to worry about opportunities for transmission. So in some types of businesses, they can work from home. And I'm saying if it's working, basically keep doing that, because it's just going to make it less complicated for you in terms of managing multiple people on site. For certain types of businesses, you can limit the amount of interaction that one needs with the client by offering other ways of delivering services and products, of course, which people have been doing. This is going to be a necessary part for everything that we do, is that if people are sick, they should not be going to work. They shouldn't be on transit. They shouldn't go to school. People should be self-isolating, and they should be getting tested, frankly, if they have symptoms of COVID, and wait until their results are back before they and are well before they would go back. So that means screening, and so we have a screening tool that's on our website that every employee should be doing every day as they come to work, that to make sure that they do not have any symptoms, because if so, they shouldn't be there. If they develop symptoms while at work during the day, then they should notify their supervisor and go home. Certainly, people are more of a risk than objects or surfaces. But with that being said, it's still potentially possible for people to, touch a contaminated surface, touch their face, and become infected. So that's why it's really important for hand hygiene. And when we sneeze or cough, we don't do it on our hands, but rather are doing it in our sleeve. Distancing is our primary means of preventing transmission. And so in the design of your workplace and the flow of people, you're trying to maintain that 2-meter distance or 6-foot difference between people, both between your staff and the public, but also between your staff if they're not a member of the same household. Where it's not feasible to say as the cashier, as we've seen in many locations, to use a physical barrier such as plexiglass. For those surfaces that people tend to touch, the doorknobs, the counters, the bathroom fixtures, I mean, those need to be cleaned more frequently, and we recommend at least a couple of times a day. I'm going to talk about masking in a little bit more because of our new context this week, but as an employer in terms of providing the necessary equipment that people need to be able to do their work. Oh, and there it is. So as you know, as of a couple of days ago, Ottawa Public Health, as well as our adjacent public health units, implemented directives under the provincial emergency order requiring masks to be worn in indoor public spaces. You may not be surprised that we've had a ton of questions as to, well, does it apply to all spaces? And the answer is no. So essentially applies to spaces that you as a member of public can access. So if there's a locked door, then that means you don't have access. So for the apartment building or the condo, it doesn't apply. Now, the risk of saying that, of course, is that saying, well, then masks aren't important. But that's not the case. It's just a question of what the scope of this particular policy is. What we've been telling people in workplaces or in the condo or the apartment is that, listen, if you have places where people are at risk of congregating and not being able to maintain distancing or not knowing whether you're going to be able to maintain distancing, then you're going to want to be considering wearing masks and considering having a policy for that. The policy or the directive, I should say, lays out the expectations. The expectations being that you will have signage at your entranceways, that there's a requirement that people wear masks. That applies also to staff unless they are behind a barrier. It also requires hand sanitizer to be available at entrances, and it also that as an operator, that you or your staff would, as soon as possible, when someone enters that is not wearing a mask, to inform them of the policy. But it stops there. It doesn't expect you to enforce the policy. It doesn't expect you to deny service, but rather the expectation is to have signage, your staff are masked, that there's hand sanitizer, and that you're politely informing them that that the policy exists. Now, the bylaw that has been drafted and will be going to City Council next week has similar content. Of course, it will be up to Council, which has the decision-making authority in terms of whether they agree with everything in there and pass it. We would anticipate that it'll be very similar in terms of expectations for operators afterward it is passed. The other thing I would mention about the masking is that while there's often questions around enforcement and stuff, really this is around education and really around encouraging people to understand why it's important for us to wear masks, why we're trying to prevent a resurgence, and we're trying to put ourselves in the best position possible to be able to reopen and stay reopened. And I'm happy to answer questions at the end if you have some, which you might in fact have. In terms of common issues, there's a number of them here listed here, which I will proceed to walk through and give some points. So for staff scheduling, so for bigger operations where you have a number of staff, with the screening and avoiding crowding and maintaining distancing, a lot of workplaces find it's useful to stagger start times and stop times so that not everyone is showing up at the same time. Similarly, for lunches and breaks, you're trying to avoid the crowding and congregation that can occur. We had issues with some workplaces before things were locked down in terms of people at breaks actually letting their guard down because it's a fellow colleague and they didn't view them as risky as the public. And the answer is all people are potentially risky, particularly when people can be infectious without symptoms. So the importance of distancing with your colleagues as well as with members of the public. For those that are big enough to have teams, we recommend cohorting. So having members of the team just work with that team. And the thinking behind that is that if someone becomes ill, it limits the number of people who have been exposed. Whereas if everybody is mixing all over the place and maybe different work sites, then you start potentially exposing. And we've had situations where someone's infected, didn't know they were infected. They were incubating, and they only became symptomatic a day or two later, but were still infectious. And they visited multiple sites, and therefore they exposed people at all those sites that then needed to be isolated. Some places they've tried to avoid this, but sometimes just part of the nature of the operation where you need to have like a team meeting. Well, ideally you do it outside versus indoors because outdoors is safer than indoors. And you maintain the distancing across people. So maybe the high fives and the team hugs that maybe some workplaces would do, unless you're a member of the same household, please don't do that. It takes extra time to do the extra cleaning and disinfection, so you need to build that into schedule. And it's easy for people to get fatigued with this stuff and say, well, it's not here, we don't have to worry about it. So it's to keep that communication and keep that interest and activity, because you don't want the case or the outbreak in your place to be the reminder of why you wanted to do this in the first place. I've already talked about the active screening. We do have a questionnaire that can be used, and it's on our website that can be downloaded. It's less of an issue recently in terms of travel, but we are beginning to see more people traveling for different reasons. And so it's very important that anyone who's had recent international travel, that they would be in quarantine for 2 weeks. And also, in addition to screening staff, there should be signage at your entranceway, also reminding people not to enter if they have symptoms. One of the ways to screen also for people coming is that if you take appointments, and that you can control volumes that way, but it's also an opportunity to make sure that they don't have any symptoms or recent travel. A number of strategies, and of course, what's going to work well is going to depend on the nature of your business and your operations. But some of the things that people do is knowing the layout and the size of their space, say a retail location, is to restrict the number of people coming in. And we see that in grocery stores and big box stores all the time. Making sure workspaces are spread out. So I'm thinking of, the back office functions, because sometimes we forget about those. We worry about the shop floor, for example, but actually there's transmission risk in the back office too. And, are people spaced out? I've talked to some people who say they're working out of a trailer. Well, that's going to be really tough to do because it's tough to maintain 2 feet distance, plus you're indoors, plus it's a confined space. So you're just basically kind of asking for a risk there for something like COVID. So, talking to surveyors, engineers, that kind of thing, the construction managers, foremen, a lot of them are not using those trailers the way they did in the past, and are working more remotely and come onto the site and then come off. In terms of those who have retail, you're encouraging people not to be touching all the objects, but try and limit themselves to the items that they plan on buying. And of course, we've seen in retail locations people providing reminders to people saying, okay, this is 2 meters apart, so make sure, be courteous, and have space for people. And really, it's almost going through all of the parts of the operation to say, where's there an opportunity for interaction and the loss of distancing? So what are we going to do to manage that risk? Where might people be touching frequently? How, we'll clean that more often. For staff illness, I've already talked about people who are ill shouldn't come to work. And this is this is different from how we've typically operated in the past where, people say, just a cold or whatever. Well, as someone asked me, they said, so how do you differentiate a cold from COVID? And the answer is not easily because the symptoms entirely overlap. And so the only way, frankly, is by testing. And I've already mentioned about employees develop symptoms while at work. They should notify supervisor, go home, get tested. There's information on our website around testing. But certainly at this point, essentially anyone can be tested. People with symptoms are prioritized to get their tests back quicker because action depends on it. And as I said before, if you've been tested because you have symptoms, you should not be wandering around the community. You should be isolated at home until we get your result back. If you have a situation where you have someone who's positive for COVID in your workplace, then we will work with you, we being Ottawa Public Health, in terms of working through who may have been exposed, what sort of communication is required, and what sort of testing and control measures are required. So we'll work with you on that. There also may be situations, in addition to someone who has symptoms, who may be instructed by us to that they need to self-isolate and not be at work. And so we would just say, please follow that guidance with your employee because there's good reasons for us doing it. Importance of access to hand washing and hand sanitizer. Certainly in the realm of wearing masks, you should be cleaning your hands before you put on your mask and before you take it off. After you touch high touch areas, washroom, before lunch, all those sorts of things. So the ready access just makes it more convenient to be able to use it when you need it. Excuse me. Cleaning and disinfection. Well, if people are using the same object, then ideally it's disinfected in between. So one way to limit the amount of disinfection you do is less sharing of equipment, but depending on what the equipment is, that's not always feasible. I've already talked about the importance of increased cleaning, at least a couple times a day of high touch areas. And it's not that difficult to inactivate this virus when it's on a surface. And so any of the common cleaning products, so if you pick up common cleaning products that you may even have at home, they'll have a DIN number, and that's what you're looking for. It'll be on the typically the bottom of the label, and then the manufacturer's instructions in terms of how to use it, dilute it, and how much contact time it needs, that sort of thing. So that's really all I was just going to sort of share up front. As I said, I'm most interested in the types of questions you have. Here is a list of resources from the Government of Ontario, the City of Ottawa. The business toolkit is something that we collaborated with the City of Ottawa to try and put in one place a set of information and tools and hyperlinks to other sources. And then there's a number of sources of information on the Ottawa Public Health website itself, which we are constantly updating as we get more requests as we do this. So as I said, I'm very happy to take questions and do our best to answer them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brent. So I'm going to ask you to stop sharing for the time being. So you saw that there's a number of really helpful links in Brent's presentation. We will be sending out a copy of that slide deck so that you have access to all of those links. Now we have some really interesting mix of businesses and guests on the line today. We have a couple of representatives from farms with roadside operations. We have a theater company and we have a startup. So we have a nice small group today, so I want you all to feel free and welcome to unmute yourself and ask the questions of Brent and Aaron directly. I would imagine there's a lot of questions about handling cash in a safe manner. I would expect there's also questions about food production and how to do that safely in preparation for food to take it to their stalls or their markets. So who would like to start the conversation first? Does anyone have a burning question right away? Sheila, do you want to unmute yourself? Sheila, don't forget to unmute. We can't hear you. There we go.
There we go. Okay, I'll start because my questions are fairly different from the other people's, and then maybe I'll leave and you can talk about the agricultural stuff. I represent a community theater group which operates in the rural area. We are hoping, upon hope, to be able to do a show in the fall, but we also do workshops, and those are going to be starting in September. So you can imagine that we have concerns because absolutely we want to keep everybody safe. We're operating out of the Alfred Taylor Community Center with our show, which is going to give us enough room. Probably, hopefully by then we can do 50 people. If not, then the show might not go on, but we do have the workshops coming up. The workshop is 7 people, but we want to make sure that they're kept safe. One of the questions that has really, that people have really thought about, our rehearsals for our show are starting in September. And of course, the whole mask issue with actors on stage is a fun one. And you mentioned cohorting. I guess, does that mean that they can do rehearsals, or should, like, you can understand we're in a conundrum. How do you do a rehearsal when you're in a play where people do touch each other and there's actually kissing in this play? But I thought, my personal view is it would be fun to do it with the masks, simply because that is the situation that we are in here. And even to the extent where maybe somebody's coming a little close and you put up your hand and put the mask and really work it into the play. I don't know if Norm Foster is going to love us for doing that, but what the heck. It is what it is. But the cohorting, we want to make sure that our people are safe in rehearsals. And we have said that it is not up to them to set the standard, it's up to us to set the standard. How do we work with the cohorting? I guess that's the question. How do you see that rolling out in terms of rehearsals? There are 6 people in the play plus the director, and that's probably going to be it for most of the time.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you for the question. I mean, I think that the way I was using cohorting probably doesn't apply here.
Okay.
I mean, if you told me that you had, 35 actors, and then you sort of say, well, do they all have to be intermixing with each other, or can we break them into teams or groups or cohorts and then keep them separate from each other? So that's what, and you would do the same thing. And I'm sorry, I'm not a farmer, but with herds of animals, like you group them separately so that if one gets affected, it doesn't spread, hopefully, to your other herds. In this case, you're only dealing with 7 people. So I think that is your cohort, frankly.
Right.
Okay. So then
they would have to keep themselves separate from other things that they're doing, though.
Well, then this becomes the question. So you've got, is it possible in the rehearsal, but I think you're going to have trouble, is for them to maintain distancing as much as possible. So as you're doing, reading scripts and stuff, you'll have that potential. They can wear masks, as you said. If you're going to wear masks in your production, then you would wear it there. Are you doing this indoors versus outdoors?
Well, they'll be rehearsing indoors.
Okay. Then it's kind of like what some workplaces have had to do, where they sort of say, we're going to have some intermingling, and then you're trying to then limit how many people that they are interacting with outside. Because if each person is then intermingling with another 10 or 10 people, and then so then you've got essentially 70 people coming together each time, and then you're really increasing your risks. And so it's a tough one, but it's almost like a sports team where you're going to need to have some interaction to be able to do it. Like we were just talking about this new professional basketball team that's in Ottawa. And so, like, by being part of this team, or in this case a team of actors, where you're going to be working in close proximity, masks, if you can, is you're trying to limit how many additional close interactions that you're having outside that, because the more people there are, the more interaction and the more opportunity there's going to be for spread, and someone in this group is going to get hit. And if someone gets hit with COVID, then if they're all in close contact, they're all close contacts, and they're at risk of hitting everybody.
Yeah, certainly we want them to wear masks. Now, one of the things we're not going to allow them to do is just say, oh, we're going to rehearse in somebody's basement so they can avoid wearing masks. We're not going to allow them to do that. It's work, whether it's in their basement, and as the organization, we're responsible, and we're going to insist that they wear the masks.
But the other thing I would say also is that confined spaces are a bad idea.
Oh, I know.
Like we've had some sort of super spreader events that people have talked about, where you've got a fairly small physical space, a tight ceiling, not much air exchange, and that's just a recipe for transmission. And that's where people, you might have seen in the media this week, people talking about airborne transmission. Well, that's the ideal thing, where it's just too much of a confined space. So that cozy romantic restaurant that we used to think of it that way, that's going to be more challenging as we go to dine in, if it's a really confined space with poor ventilation.
Okay, so
wouldn't want to be rehearsing. So if you're in a place that's got space and air, that's better.
So it's better for them to rehearse in a larger spot.
Yes.
Okay. That's good, because as I said, when we come back and tell them that these are the rules, I can say, I talked to somebody and this is what they said.
and we've actually provided some guidance to film and production
kind
companies.
Of what we are,
so that may be useful. Erin, I just saw you there. Would you have anything else to add I think you worked on that.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that film guidance, and I can share it. I don't believe it was shared in the resources for this presentation, but I'll share it so that you can for sure have it, Sheila.
That would be great. Thank you so much, because as we are working forward, we are dealing with actors, we are dealing with rehearsals. Eventually, we'll be having to add technical people as we get closer to a play. Our fingers are crossed, and we are certainly intending to do everything we can. Like, these are the things. We have workshops coming up. There's 7 people. I definitely want them in a bigger room. They're working with computers, so they are going to have to be inside. But if we have a nice big room, they're wearing masks, they're working at computers at least 6 feet apart. Exactly. I think we should be good.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the distancing comes into play, and don't forget the screening daily. Like, no one with symptoms.
No one with symptoms. Well, I've got that written down, underlined several times, because for all of our things, we have to consciously always be aware of symptoms. Anybody who is feeling sick at all cannot participate in anything that we're doing, and that certainly is one of our big rules.
Yeah, no, and what we've we've been through this with, designing the guidance for day camps. And so again, that's a cohort of kids who are going to be a little closer together. And we say, listen, if you have symptoms, unfortunately you're out. We recommend testing. So either you have a negative test, you need a negative test and symptom free for 24 hours before you can come back. Otherwise,
Okay.
it's 14 days.
Okay.
14 days plus no symptoms for 24 hours, whichever is longer.
Okay, that's good. Now, with respect to the masks, that was another thing that came up at our meeting. My personal opinion is that the masks need to be in place for as long as needed in order to keep people safe. And in order to keep people safe, that's going to be until people can be safe with the vaccine. So I'm really not seeing the masks disappearing by November. But there are many schools of thought in my organization about that.
Yeah, I don't think we know for sure. The vaccine thing answer kind of that's a long way away, and
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
bit discouraging, frankly. And so someone's just calling me. Let me just take that, sorry. And I think that the next challenges that we face as a community are the stage 3 reopenings.
Yeah.
Which the premier is hinting that he's going to announce in the next couple of weeks. So that's, bigger groups, bigger opportunity
Yeah.
for interaction, includes probably theaters,
Yes.
and as well as movie cinemas, fitness clubs. There's a number of things on that list, some more indoor fitness activities. So we're going to have all that occurring. So again, we're going to be vigilant about, okay, what's going to happen in the upcoming weeks after those things start opening. Plus, we're going to have schools opening in some kind of way. And then the colleges and universities are going to be opening up in some kind of way. Plus, what is the government of Canada going to do about the U.S. border?
God, keep it
Right?
closed.
Yeah, well, so we've got a combination of new challenges for us, and we're going to have to be really vigilant to watch what happens. And you know what? If it all goes well, then I think we get to sort of reassess, saying, well, do we still think we need masks? But
Okay.
let's get through all that, because those are some significant challenges. Plus, it's then viral flu season as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
And it's just, and we'll be more indoors, so more opportunities for transmission in indoors. So it's that we have a number of challenges, and we'll want to, at a minimum, get through all of that with things going well.
Yeah, I'm thinking that for us, we're looking sort of mid-November, and I'm thinking a lot of this may not be resolved by then. Okay.
But you know what? Thank you,
Take
because I think this is a good example where every business has to think through its operations and try and
Right.
open up as safely as possible. Like, we want to be able to open up, because we said it's important for health, but we want to do it as safely as possible and give ourselves the best chance of getting through this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And as I said, we are a not-for-profit organization, but we depend on people knowing us and coming to our shows and things like that for us to stay in business. So we need to get back into business too, just like everybody else.
Great. Okay. Well,
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thanks, Sheila. So we have a food-related question.
Sure.
It's not from a food producer, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it might be something that our farmer are wondering about. And he wants to know, should we sanitize our groceries before putting them in the refrigerator? And if so, is there a recommended method to do so?
So in general, no. And certainly wouldn't sanitize, because sanitize suggests that we're using a cleaning product like bleach or Mr. Clean. So no, I would not be doing that. Again, people are more of a risk than surfaces, and so that's the issue. But so I could tell you. So what I do, it goes in my fridge. Certainly for things that I'm not going to cook, I would soap and water, which is what I do normally, say with my vegetables or a piece of fruit. And that's all. Certainly the bags, as you come in, your hands may have gotten contaminated as you went through the store. So as I going out of the store, I would clean my hands before I get in the car. I would, transfer the bags, take the stuff out, clean my hands again, clean the surface that I put the bags down on, but I would not be sanitizing or cleaning the food products before I put them in my fridge. But I would wash them as I normally would before I use them.
Thank you. So I'm going to open this up to Liz, Marianne, Bev, and Cheryl to see what kind of questions you're wondering about, or if there's specific guidance that you'd like for your businesses. Are you finished lunch now, Marianne? Awesome. Marianne is a honey producer.
So I do have a question. So not related necessarily to the production. So we do have a little retail shop on our farm, which we're actually going to move outdoors for the summer. But one thing that we have offered in the past and haven't launched yet are private bee tours. So families or couples come to like see the bees. But what I'm not sure about is that requires its own PPE. They have to put on an actual beekeeping veil and jacket. Is that something that we can do safely if we wash it between visits, or should we be thinking about some other type of workaround? So that's something I'm not sure about. And then my second question, well, maybe we'll do that one first, and then I'll ask my second question.
Yeah, I can't say I've had that question before.
I bet.
No, I don't even think I've had sharing of clothing before. I mean, I've had the issues with like thrift stores, you know, who are receiving donations. And so in that situation, we would recommend that they would launder the clothing. That would be the simplest thing.
Right.
And if they couldn't do that, that they would essentially put it aside and quarantine it,
Right.
and just let any virus on the surface die. Now, typically, the virus lasts longer on a smooth surface, you know, like a metal or a plastic, whereas at cloth it doesn't live as long. But you know what? I think this is the first example where we're going to take that one away and think about it. I presume, like, I don't think I've worn one of these before. You don't launder these. Oh, I've seen them,
Yeah.
but it's you know, the helmets are mesh, and then it's fairly thick.
So they are. So ours are like a cloth hood that has like a screen that goes down the front. I have washed them. It is harder on them. Like they're not gonna last as long, but so be it.
Right.
Certainly, I just wanted to know. And then the other question I had related to that is to take people on a tour of a beehive. They kind of have to get close enough to the beehive to be able to see it, even though it's outdoors. Should people be wearing masks in the veil, in the suit, or I'm just not quite sure about all of those.
So if you're outdoors, I mean, the bigger issue is maintaining distancing.
Okay.
So if they're not in the same household, they should be maintaining 6 feet apart. So you wouldn't want to take, you know, I don't know, say you have 5 people from 2 different households. You wouldn't want them all in a cluster, you know, looking at the hive. You might have to have them take turns.
And I guess if we're going to have it private so that it's people from the same household coming, but in terms of us as the beekeeper showing them, we'll have to be somewhat close in order to show them what they're looking at. So that's why we're not even quite sure if it's feasible.
Oh, I see. Well, I mean, the closer you get to people and the more often you're doing this, the more you're putting yourself at risk, right? Because for them, it's just you once. But for you, it's multiple people repeatedly. Right. Now, the good news is you're outdoors, but it's close proximity.
Okay.
Now, you could reduce the risk by having both groups wear a mask.
Yeah.
But that doesn't lower it to 0.
Okay.
Outside's better. But it's also that repeated exposure part that also sort of is crossing my mind.
And so then we also have kind of like a walking tour that we haven't relaunched, but that's more, I think, very easy for people to maintain distance and kind of walk through if they choose. But how are vineyards and those types of businesses I know that tours outdoors are there any like best practices for tours outdoors that people should be thinking about?
Yeah. So Erin, have we done that yet? Erin, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Which happens every time.
It happens in every meeting all the time, despite best intentions. So I'm not entirely sure. I don't believe we have guidance, but I think there might be guidance that exists. I think this is another takeaway that I'll put on our list of what we can follow up with.
Yeah, and the beekeeper outfit is the other one.
I've got it noted down. Yeah.
And I have one more question, and I think it's kind of coming clear to me. But so we do a program. It's the equivalent of like a CSA, like a community supported agriculture, but it's for honey. And every year in September we have a bee day where everybody who's participated shows up to pick up their honey and see the bees. Now, in the past, we haven't. We just let people come when they want, and it's like 100 families, and it's a lot of people. So obviously that won't work. We're kind of, do we break that up into times that are limited to groups of 10, or do we just scrap it and deliver their honey to their house and do some sort of virtual bee day? Like, your advice would be kind of welcome on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how much you want to do it.
Right.
So the more you want to do it because you think it's important for your business or your community, then you have to then design it accordingly. And that's where the work comes in. So you're already starting to thinking that through in terms of, okay, so we're going to have to spread people out in time and space. So that means we're going to have to sort of have reservations or tell people show up in this time period because we may not be able to accommodate you in another one. And then, if people are being people, they may not show up exactly the right time. You might have groups. You might have to. You need to sit in your car until we're ready for you.
Okay.
And then how will you maintain distancing between households? Like it's almost similar to your tour question.
Right.
Like if you're doing a tour of your bee areas, you'd have to design that. So it's just more work on your part to organize that. It probably in the past, maybe one person could do this, but if someone is accompanying them, then you got to have someone greeting as well. So it's going to increase the number of people that you're going to need to be involved.
Right.
And just to add, we actually have guidance on this as well around pickup, kind of click and collect style. Kind of, it's more for markets, but I think it would work for this too. So we'll add that to the follow-up list of guidance to send.
Okay, thank you.
And what about farmers and operators that are doing sort of like a pick your own? We were talking about the blueberries. They're coming into season very, very shortly. Is there specific guidance or instructions for businesses that are operating like that, other than keeping everyone 6 feet apart in the rows?
Aaron, I haven't seen any guides. Actually I was biking past like such a plot where people were picking. And I think that as an operator, your responsibility would be to control the number of people coming in. So, but usually these are huge fields, right? So you can accommodate a lot, but is to remind people saying, please stay together. Please, maintain your distancing. So your main issues are going to be as people enter, to maintain distancing while you process them coming in, making sure you're maintaining distance as they do come in. And then as they come out, you want them going out a separate place so they're not running into the in people if your volumes are like that. And then how you're going to do your payment to make sure you maintain distancing or you have a barrier.
I would imagine that a lot of agricultural businesses, roadside stalls, farmers markets, they're going to be very cash oriented as opposed to electronic payments. Is there any specific guidance you can offer them for managing cash in a safe way?
So my first thing would be, are you sure you want to do cash? Because to be honest with you, in my travels, where I've gone to markets and different places, where I've been really surprised at the technology. People with an iPhone with a little attachment in there, I'm paying with a card. But if you are with cash, again, it's people are a bigger risk than substances. So you don't want to be totally focused on the cash, and you're too close with these people, and it's person after person. So that's giving you repeated exposures and risk. So you're going to end up, put the cash there, step away, or I've got the hockey stick thing to bring it to me. So you have the cash, and some people are going to say, oh, well, we'll do gloves, but gloves can give you a false sense of security because you think they're always clean, but as soon as you touch something, they're contaminated, and people have a tendency of forgetting. So I'm not a big fan of gloves. So if I'm taking the person's cash, things are okay, and I make change and I put change in and it goes. my hands are contaminated now, so I have to clean my hands. So you'd want to have hand sanitizer. You might even, I think it'd be a good idea to have hand sanitizer for your clients as well. So they take the cash, put it in their pocket, they clean their hands, and they're going away with clean hands. So you'd want for both. But it's extra work, it's extra steps. And so you try to avoid that as much as possible, but I think you could do it. Aaron, do we have any cash guidance? For the most part, we've been telling people to don't do it. But I can appreciate that there's circumstances where it might be necessary.
Yeah, a number of our guidances definitely talk about kind of click and collect kind of models. I'll have to check.
Yeah. Our preference would be to avoid that, but recognizing that may not be feasible for really small operations, or if you have lousy cell service, maybe where you are and that kind of thing. But
yeah, I'm going to imagine that that's going to be a challenge for a lot of farmers. Stalls is that they just simply don't have the broadband or connectivity to run a payment processing system.
So if you can't do it, you can't do it. So I mean, I think I just said, but I think it's helpful if you had something in writing. So if we don't have it, someone will have it and we'll get it to you. But it's not the end of the world. It's just that you got to think, okay, my hands are contaminated now. We got to clean my hands. Okay, on to the next thing.
So I just want to circle back to the question about the gentleman who wanted to know about washing the groceries. I mean, we all know or should know that when you bring home your fresh produce, you need to wash it. So is that, that'll be sufficient then? And the producers, the farmers, do not have to take any extra steps? Just simply package it and ready for sale?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Liz, did you have anything that you wanted to ask that's maybe unique or special to your operation? Oh, you need to unmute yourself so we can hear you. It's in your bottom left-hand corner. You should see a little
video.
Where'd she go? I think we lost her altogether. Oh no, she's on an iPad, so it might be a little more challenging. Liz, you can also use the chat if you want to type anything out. And Cheryl, you're a farm/operator as well. Did you have any questions that you wanted to put to Brent and Aaron while we have them on the call today? Oh, Liz.
I'm back, if that's any help.
Awesome.
Sorry.
No problem.
A lot of what I was really wondering about, I think, has been covered. We'll be set up with hand washing facilities. We'll have hand sanitizers. So I didn't know if the glove thing was a good idea or not. So I think you've covered that. And our situation is we're going to try doing the tap type transactions, but we're in an area where we're not sure that that's going to actually work for us. So it's an experiment this year. We'll see how it goes. We do have a picking crew, whether or not they should be using gloves when they are picking, or can they just use their hands and then we'll package.
Yeah, because I don't think the gloves give you any special magic here. Like, I mean, if you contaminate your hands, if you had gloves on them, they'd be contaminated.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, and then practically speaking, I mean, certainly, yes, before you go out to the field, you should wash your hands. If you sneezed, don't sneeze on your hands. Having some hand sanitizer with them would be a bonus if they do happen to sneeze on their hands or something like that. They could then clean their hands. But I think that would be reasonable to do.
Okay. And then the other piece, sorry?
I was just going to say, fortunately, corn comes in its own protective packaging too. So.
Oh yeah, if it's corn, yeah. So I was thinking fruit. So.
We were talking about that earlier. That's why I know.
Okay. Yeah. No. I'm even less worried about corn.
Yeah. The other piece as well is if the picking staff should be wearing masks or face shields.
So it depends on their space, because their biggest risk is their colleague, right?
Yeah.
So it depends on how this works. Like, I mean, if you can have them separated out by 6 feet between them, then there's no worries. I mean, clearly you're outside, which is even better. But, you know, if they're in a situation where they're sort of side by side or, you know, are, you know, touching each other almost, that's a little close for, yeah, I would be wearing masks outside.
Yeah, okay.
And
Is there
again,
any advantage?
not working if they're sick.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And there's no advantage between a mask versus a shield, or they're kind of the same?
No, they're not. Actually, great question. Thank you for raising it. So the way that masks work is the idea is to filter our respiratory droplets that leave our mouth as we talk. And we have more droplets, of course, if we're shouting or singing. But I mean, the idea is to wear a mask and it filters those out. The problem with a face shield is it doesn't filter. And we've had people say, you know, I'd rather wear a face shield because it's easier to breathe. And I said, well, the reason it's easier to breathe is because it's not filtering the air. And so Public Health Ontario, which is the scientific agency for public health in this province, as well as other organizations, are saying, you know, it's not equivalent to a mask because it doesn't filter. But for people, you know, for example, that we've had who have a condition that doesn't allow them to wear a mask, we would say, well, a face shield is better than nothing. It'll do a little bit of work in terms of blocking droplets, but it's not as good as a mask.
So say if it's flipped the other way for the staff who are dealing with the clientele coming to our stand, is a shield provide more protection versus the mask? Like, because we're kind of making the assumption that our staff are well. We don't know so much about the people coming to the stand.
Right. So again, you're outside, which helps.
Yep.
Your next friend, so being outdoors is your friend, distance is your friend. So the more the staff person can be, you know, that 6 feet or as close to that as possible, that's their friend as well.
I'm also thinking about the heat that we are having right now.
Yes, it makes it more difficult to wear a mask. And I think it's going to be from being outdoors at a stand in the sun. I think you're going to have a tough time, frankly, wearing a mask. You know, a shield will provide some protection. Can't say how much. Certainly, if you're a really busy stand, I'm thinking more of a farmers markets where they could sort of suggest people wear, just because there's a lot of potential crowding there, although some of those are still supposed to be with less crowding and strategies to do that. But if you're sort of a roadside stand in a more rural area, you're not likely to have huge crowds at any one moment.
Some days we do.
Oh, some days you do? Well, good for you. Yeah. Good for you. Sorry to assume.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's encouraging them to distance each other would be a courteous thing to do. And you could also say, you know, please, you know, help the health of yourself and us and maintain distancing. That would be your primary strategy.
Yeah, well, I think right now our goal is we're going to start with the drive-through system and barrier the stand to try and protect the staff more than anything. Yeah. And of course the public, but if we can keep them confined to their vehicles, because traditionally you get out and you roam around, you look at the produce and you select what you want. Whereas we're hoping, at least for our main stand that gets quite busy, to try and keep people in their cars. Yeah. And then we will set up the barriers and try to keep that distance that way.
Yeah. The biggest challenge I see with some of the curbside stuff is the staff person starts leaning into the car to hear what they're saying, and you're watching the distance get shorter and shorter and shorter. So that would be just something to really emphasize, saying this is really what the distance should be.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so good luck.
Thank you. Liz, now you did mention that there's a link for some signage and stuff like that in the
Yes, on our website, and there'll be hyperlinks in the PowerPoint.
Okay. That's great. Thank you very much.
And this, for your location that is very, very busy, if you have a dedicated area for payment, can you consider the use of a plexiglass divider for payment taking?
Yeah, I don't know how it would work so well with the drive-through, but we might have to do some sort of hockey stick approach,
We-
perhaps, to see how that will go.
Which they would do, you know, some of the drive-throughs.
Yeah.
So that might be just for the distancing that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's to keep people in their.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Aaron, did you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, no, but again, I think this is something that we do have information on that, you know, that I can make sure you have, but Brent, you've covered it.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
making sure. Feel free to jump in.
It's Phil here. Phil Jansen. I joined a little late, so I'm sorry if I chiming into something that's already been said. But I'm thinking of the drive-through example of, you know, McDonald's, where they have a payment window and then one where you get your food. So that could be a model you may want to use, just so that you limit the time of the interaction. And then I'm also to show my cards, I work from public health, but I was at Dominion City Brewing Company yesterday, and they make you pay online first, and then you drive up and honk for service. So there's no kind of, and then you just open your trunk, you leave it unlocked, and they do it for you. So if that's optional, I know Shopify has some good options to set you up for online purchases, but that's not always feasible for everyone.
Yeah, I don't think it's feasible in our case, but
No,
thank you.
Yeah, Phil, we were talking about that earlier, and the issue is sometimes the connectivity in a rural setting to take electronic payments.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, it was something that I hadn't really thought of in terms of operating a roadside stand, but it's certainly an issue that the Board of Trade has been looking at, because with working from home, with a lot of people living in smaller communities and commuting in, now they're working from home and they don't have the broadband to work properly. So Liz, we are looking at the issue on your behalf, just so you know. Now,
Awesome. Thanks.
Cheryl, you represent a lot of different agricultural-based organizations and businesses. Did you have anything that you specifically wanted to ask or know to communicate back?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about facility rental, because on our grounds we have different buildings. We have barns used for livestock shows, another building that's used for wedding receptions, stag and does, meetings. We have a smaller building used for meetings. So I guess, and we have one small washroom facility. So what I've gleaned so far from reading different things is, say for the washrooms, we have posted, because right now we have a farmer's market going on Saturdays for a few hours, that only one person in the washroom at a time, having signage up in the buildings, the buildings, which we haven't opened them up at this point in time to renters other than the farmers market building, that we would ask them to follow public health guidelines. But are there any other best practices that we should be looking at for facility rental?
So probably I would say going through, say, the business toolkit and just going down the list. Mm-hmm. Because pretty well the issues are common to any business. Like the details vary, but just to force yourself to make sure, okay, we've got screening, that there's distancing, that, how are we dealing with cleaning and disinfection. So for the washroom, high touch surfaces, ideally that would be a couple of times a day. If you got large volumes, then you might need it more often to maintain sanitary conditions and making sure there's hand sanitizer. So, because again, as people come in, they should be able to clean their hands, they do their thing, and they should be able to clean their hands as they leave, without touching stuff. So those are the sorts of things to build in. If you've got high touch surfaces in your rental spaces, door handles, railings, those kinds of things, then who's going to clean those? Is that your responsibility? Is that sort of a responsibility that you're delegating? But of course, if you delegate it, then how do you know? maybe while they operate, it's their responsibility, but then it becomes your responsibility, right? As you prepare for your next clients. So making sure you've got your high touch surfaces. You're also going to need to be worried about whatever the provincial emergency order says about gatherings.
Yes.
You know, right now we're at 10, right? So
Mhm.
that probably will go up with stage 3, but it, you know, being aware of that kind of thing. And again, the rules are different if we're outdoors versus indoors for certain types of things like weddings, for example. And then different rules for wedding ceremonies versus receptions. And so it's tough to keep track of this. Hopefully it all becomes simpler, but you know, those are things, because as an operator, it's your responsibility to operate within whatever the emergency order rules are. Erin, I think you had something you wanted to add too.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking kind of in this facility renting kind of scenario, thinking about the rental agreement, and perhaps there's things that could be added to the rental agreement for when the space is being used to ensure additional safety, or that the renters are adhering to public health measures as well while they're using the space, just as a thought. I think that type of thing might be in the business toolkit, or at least some of the IPAC measures in there. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help, Cheryl?
Yep, that's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So we've gone just a little bit over our time today. We're just past 2 o'clock, so it's time for us to wind up. I just want to remind everyone that the link to today's session will be on our website in less than 24 hours. We'll also get the slide deck sent out to everyone who registered today, including the additional guidance on some specific topics. So we'll get some of those more personalized ones out to Sheila and Marianne and so on. And I just want to thank everybody for participating today. I wish you all a safer reopening of your businesses. And if the Ottawa Board of Trade can help you with anything, please let me know, and I'm happy to help. And Brent and Erin, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom and guidance with our audience. Have a great afternoon. Stay inside and stay cool because it's really hot out there. And have a great day. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.